For centuries, cassava has been a staple food in developing world, providing a basic diet for over 500 million people. In Nigeria, one of the world's largest producers of cassava, the crop is produced in 24 of the country's 36 states.
Cassava is one of the main staple crop in Nigeria, especially in the southern states of Nigeria. When I mean southern states, we start up to Benue, Taraba, down to the south here, which is the southeast, and then up to Delta, Edo, and the whole of western Nigeria.
In 1999, Nigeria produced 33 million tons, while a decade later, it produced approximately 45 million tons, which is almost 19% of the world cassava production. The average yield per hectare is 10.6 tons. Cassava is originally a crop of South America, introduced into Nigeria's southern parts during the period of slave trade. Cassava production was proliferated by Portuguese explorers and colonizers in the 16th century. Its importance to Nigeria, however, got a boost in the late 19th century when more slaves returned to their homeland and introduced cassava processing techniques. Over the years, it has become a major economic sustenance crop. In Nigeria, cassava production is well developed as an organized agricultural crop. It has well-established multiplication and processing techniques for food products and animal feed. The leaves may be consumed as a vegetable or used as a soup ingredients for human consumption. Cassava leaves, rich in protein, can also be dried and fed to livestock as a nutritious feed supplement. The stem is used for plant propagation and grafting. Baking flour can also be made from cassava.
You can use cassava to make garri, alebo, which cassava flour. But for industrial use, there's something they call high quality cassava flour. You blend it with flour for the confectionery industry. You can use cassava to make starch. You can use cassava to make sweeteners. The sweeteners you use, what you call hydrolyzed starch. You have other industrial uses of cassava. The problem now is the struggle between food crops and industrial use. So you find out that cassava is more of an cash crop. People have to grow it to make what? Money.
Cassava culture varies with the purposes for which it is grown. It is either planted as a single crop or intercropped with maize, vegetables, rubber, oil palm, or other plants. Cassava plants, a perennial that grows to a height of about 2.4 meters, is propagated exclusively from cuttings. Cuttings of about 25 centimeters long are obtained from the stems of plants at least 10 months old and 2.6 centimeters thick. Cuttings are planted by hand or by planting machines. And hand planting is done in one of three ways: vertical, flat below the soil surface, or tilted 45 degrees from ground level under low rainfall conditions. But in general, flat planting 5 to 10 centimeters below the soil surface is recommended in dry climates and when mechanical planting is used. The cuttings are planted on flat soil or ridges or hills. Farmers say germination is higher as tubers tend to grow from a great number of points and closer to the surface of the soil, making better use of fertilizers applied on the surface and also making harvesting easier. On the other hand, vertical planting is used in rainy areas, while tilted planting is more common in semi-rainy areas. Time of planting is influenced by weather conditions and the availability of planting materials. As farmers also say, from the standpoint of starch production, the development of cassava plants is most profitable when planting takes place at the beginning of a humid period.
The season is this. Cassava is better when the rain is about to start, not when the seasonal rain has started properly, because cassava in itself doesn't like pure wetness. That is when water is flooded. So as rain is, if rain falls today, it might take another 1 week for the rain to come up, or it might take another 3 days. Once there's a little bit of sunshine, that's what it likes. Now there are two local seasons. You can plant now, or you can plant toward the end of the season. The earth is wet and there's enough sunshine. Then the tree can sprout. The stem can sprout and sprout.
The cassava stem blossoms into food and is taken at a certain level. Cassava, which is rich in starch in the form of carbohydrates, has multiple uses. It is consumed in many processed forms, and also as livestock feed, and as foundation for drugs. Cassava is made into flours, and flours are of 3 types: yellow gari, white gari, or intermediate color, with yellow gari considered the best product in Nigeria. The yellow gari is a derivative of the white one, made by simply adding red oil during or after the grinding phase in the gari processing. The yellow gari is a derivative of the white one, made by simply adding red oil during or after the grinding phase in the gari processing. In order to meet the increasing demand for yellow gari in Nigeria, a yellow cassava tuber distribution system is being implemented in some states in Nigeria, including Enugu. This cassava distribution system provides about 25,000 households with cassava stems. The Enugu Ministry of Agriculture distributed some cassava stems to interested farmers for planting to encourage cassava farming in the state and its environs.
The new improved Pro Vitamin A cassava cuttings developed by Harvest Plus in IITA to farmers in Enugu State. Cassava cuttings were developed to enable our farmers multiply them so that they can be distributed to farmers as planting materials. The good thing about it is that it has vitamin, it has nutrients, and less starch than the conventional cassava we are using now.
The new yellow cassava tubers are rich in vitamin A. Deficiency in vitamin A is a major nutrition issue, especially in Africa. According to reports, nearly 1/3 of Nigerian children under 5 years are deficient in vitamin A. The yellow tubers can also be used for fufu, gari, baking or starch, and can be put to several other uses.
We're innovating the food system, right? What you find here, for example, is your cassava mai. There are several other products. We wouldn't want to burn too much time here, but this is the conventional abacha. When you eat this, you are ingesting near 16 micrograms per gram of vitamin A. And research has shown very clearly that the vitamin A from cassava is easily absorbed. The potential for the body to absorb vitamin A from cassava is higher than your potential to absorb it from carrot. Because in cassava you need only 3 micrograms of vitamin A to give you 1 microgram of retinol. And retinol is the form in which vitamin A is consumed in the body.
Some of the tablets we swallow are coated with starch. In starch production, what are the uses? It's produced from cassava and used for pharmaceuticals. In Brazil, but Nigeria is coming into it. It's an alternative to fuel. You press it and you get the ethanol. And raw ethanol, which is imported in Nigeria, is sometimes abused because Nigerians drink it as if they're drinking what they call illicit gin. Kai Kai, as they popularly know. There are so many other uses.
Depending on its variety, climate, and soil characteristics, cassava is harvested from the farm for processing between 9 and 12 months. Early maturing varieties can be harvested about 9 to 12 months after planting. Other varieties can be harvested 12 to 18 months after planting.
There are two local seasons. You can plant now, or you can plant toward the end of rainy season. The earth is wet and there's enough sunshine. Then the tree can sprout.
In cold environments, tubers can stay in the ground for up to 2 years before harvest. Farmers say roots may rot or become fibrous if cassava is harvested too late. Therefore, they should be harvested when they are less than 12 months if they are for food use. After harvest, cassava is carefully peeled, washed, and then shredded into tiny particles using a tool that could be the rough edges of holes made on a metal sheet using a nail. This is done by running the peeled tubers of cassava against the rough edges of the holes, which chops the cassava gradually. The wet cassava granules are mixed with palm oil to achieve a yellow color depending on personal choice.
The yellow gari and white gari is not a reduction of cyanide. Because eating is a habit. Eating is psychological. Once you look at food and you like it, it increases your appetite. Some people like the yellow gari, the red gari, so called. Some people prefer white gari. Like if you want to swallow, they prefer red. But white is better to smoke. You can add sugar because most of the workmen don't have time to eat when they are at work. You just get a small bowl. Nigeria has advanced in pure water system. 2 sachets and put it with sugar in their pocket and smoke. They prefer white gari. Some families just like white gari.
Our people like to eat yellow gari. I don't know why. There are some people who like to eat white gari. Here in the east, it is what? Yellow gari. Poor vitamin cassava now contains vitamin A, which ordinarily is not in any cassava. So it's an added advantage. And when you process it, you don't need to add any oil to the gari. So and then the cups are bright.
The cassava granules are then put into porous bags with firmly tied ends. The bags are then held firmly in a compressor for about a day. The tight grips of the compressor forces water out through the pores of the bags, which is sometimes not a waste as it contains starch sediments. The compressed cassava is further dehydrated by frying in large pans. And after frying, the product known across Nigeria as gari is then spread on large mats to enable the evaporation of last traces of water. White or yellow gari can be made and eaten with soup as a meal or taken with beans, moi moi, akara, just gari with sugar, salt, or with granules as a snack. The same process of peeling, soaking in water for a few days, and washing is done for another delicacy known as apu, which is usually eaten with soup as a meal. But unlike the procedure for gari, cassava for apple is allowed to drain its water itself, as it is expected to remain slightly wet. It is then cooked in molds twice, first for about 45 minutes and the second time for about 30 minutes. It is then pounded until it gets a certain consistency, and then it is ready to be eaten. In some cultures, the wet ground cassava is dissolved into water in a cooking pot and put on the fire to cook. The wet cassava is stirred consistently as it cooks for about 45 minutes, after which it is also ready to be eaten. Cassava also produces starch used on clothes and food in some cultures. Starch is got from residue in water from compressed wet cassava granules. Starch is also prepared as a meal in some cultures.
You must turn all through the process, because if you leave it like that, the thing will form seed, and that seed you cannot take it out anymore. So this process now will just make it going as smooth as you really want it. Because if it has seed, you can't do it.
It is mixed with cold water and palm oil and then stirred on the fire until it is cooked. On the other hand, cassava, when cooked and shredded, can also be used for making other delicacies like abacha, which can either be dry or wet, eaten with mixed vegetables and other ingredients like uwa, pepper, onions, and fish. It can also be eaten with coconuts as another convenient snack for a hot afternoon. Cassava is classified as sweet or bitter. Farmers often prefer the bitter varieties because they deter pests, animals, and thieves.